Hi everyone, it's Hockey Girl. This is the first of my budget videos that I'm going to do. I am starting my debt-free journey. I expect some challenges, and one of them being staying motivated in a beans and rice scenario because my debt situation is a little bit different from a lot of people. It seems to total a lot. That's just really it sounds like a scary number when you total it, but there are some caveats with each of these debts that make them less scary overall, or when you look at them individually. So I'll just run down my debts. I only have four. One is a mortgage, which obviously I will not tackle until all the other debts are paid off. One is a credit card. I have $14,130.74 on a credit card. It's my Discover card. Obviously, that needs to get paid, and that's going to get paid first. I'm actually doing like a combination debt snowball, debt avalanche at the same time because it is actually my lowest balance, but it is my highest interest rate. So that's handy. I owe student loan debt, sort of. I owe at this point $19,029 and no, $19,029.39. Sorry, I'm reading it off the screen. Apparently I read it wrong. And I say sort of because when I went to college, when I was 18, my parents and I had an agreement that I would go to college and they would pay for it. And part of the reason they came up with that, my dad wouldn't let me get a job when I was in high school, not to save money for college, not to anything. He said, focus on sports, focus on school. To some extent, I think maybe it was a little bit of my dad living through me because he had had some opportunities to play college football, but didn't really have the grades or the academic, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? The academic discipline to go to college and play a sport. And here I had that opportunity. And he wanted me to, and when I was in school, focus on that. Financially, we didn't really need the money, and I was a responsible child. So, they made my brother work because he was not very responsible. And I used to joke that like they figured he'd end up in jail if he had too much time on his hands, but I'm joking. I don't really think they felt that way. But yeah, so they made him get a job. They would not let me get one. And I think part of that too, to be honest, I think some of that was my dad had a really hard time of letting go of me. I would argue he maybe still has some problems, but I think he had a very hard time letting go of me. And the more financial freedom I would get or financial independence I would get, the less I had to rely on him, the less I had to clue him in on what I was doing. Because if I have my own job and I can make my own money, I don't have to ask him for permission or for money to go someplace. And a lot of times he didn't necessarily, especially as probably about 17 or 18 years old, like I didn't necessarily have to ask his permission per se, but if I needed money, I would have to ask for the money. And then he would always know where I was going and what I was doing. I personally think that it was his sly way of doing that. And then when I got into college, I did actually play a sport. I played field hockey, Division I at Penn State, and it's really hard to go to school full time, play a sport at that level, and work a job at the same time. Some of my teammates managed to do it. I don't think I could have. These were teammates who, like, one ended up a doctor because she's brilliant. And I mean, I'm sure she studied hard, but she was also very brilliant and I think could manage. I could not. I needed to study more. And I needed to train more. Like, I wasn't really at the level of everybody else that was there. I was a walk-on, and, earned my spot while I was there, but I had a lot of work to do. And so I spent my time doing that. And my dad was okay with that. I mean, and even so, even if I could have a job, the NCAA limits the amount of money you can actually make anyway. So, because of recruiting violations, thanks football and basketball, and probably wrestling, I think. So yeah, so there's really really strict limits on like how much money you can make and that kind of stuff. So I would coach camps in the summertime for like a little bit extra spending money, but it was not enough to like chip away at my debt or anything like that. So my parents took out some parent loans. They had me take out student loans just to, I think, sort of ease the amount they had to pay then, with the idea that they'd still be paying it, and they still are. So it is technically a debt in my name. If my parents were suddenly unable to, like if next week they were no longer willing or able to pay them, then they're ultimately my responsibility. So I count that as my debt. Um, and I think it's more appropriate to pay it off now sooner than later. And so I'm going to work towards that. So I count that in the list. But again, like it's not $200 a month that comes out of my pay, which again, listen, I was able to consolidate my undergrad loans and my graduate loans, and I was able to consolidate at like 2.85 or something like that percent, which is, I got in just under the wire before the rates started getting jacked up on everybody. So even that payment, it comes out to about a $200 payment a month, and a little under 200. I pay 200. Um, it's easy. And like I said, my parents pay it anyway, so I don't feel like that coming out of my income. My other piece of debt is a debt to my retirement. Now, I first taught 2 years out of state, and I'm currently living in Pennsylvania, but I didn't know until about 10 years after I'd been in Pennsylvania working. I actually didn't know that I could buy those years that I spent out of state and actually count those towards my retirement. So basically, let's say I've taught 8 years in Pennsylvania. I honestly don't know what it is because it is so far down the line. Like I don't even need to know the specifics. It just makes me cry that I can't retire yet. I'm not even close. Let's say I'm at 8 years. Okay, I've done 8 years of service in Pennsylvania. When I buy those years, that actually gives me 10 years of service. So right now it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I know by the time I get to like 28 years, if I could retire, if I'd only bought those years, I would be kicking myself. So I went ahead and filled out the paperwork to see like how much it was going to be, things like that. And they'll add a little bit of interest every year, and the interest is like $400-500 every year. I'm actually thinking about whether or not I should just pay the interest on it so the balance doesn't get any higher, and just kind of, maybe just set a sinking fund up for something like that so that I can pay that amount and the total doesn't keep climbing. Because what happens is, so I applied for it, they accepted it. So let's say I've got 8 years actually teaching in Pennsylvania. I bought those 2 years, so now I'm at 10 years. What they'll do is, if I don't pay for those years, like actually pay into the system, they will take the value of those 2 years plus any interest that would have been earned. They will take the value of that out at the end of my retirement. So I would get, I don't even know how much it would be, but let's say it's like $50,000. So they'll take $50,000 out of my retirement fund and then pay me, in my installments based on that minus the value of those years. And I don't really want to do that. I'd rather have more money then. So I do want to pay that back, but I don't have to. Nothing is breathing down my neck other than some interest. So it started out like 14 and a half-ish. And then the next year it was like, no, it was maybe like 14.8 or 9. The next year it was like 15.4, and the most recent one I'm looking at says $15,943.07. So all totaled, of those 3 debts, it's $49,102.20, which again, like sounds crazy. My income is about $54,000 a year in my teaching job. So like that sounds scary, right? And that sounds really, really intimidating. But the only bill of that that I actually personally pay out of my income is to my Discover card. So that is going to be the first thing that I go to pay off. And then I think what I'm going to do is buy back even just debt snowball. I go back to the, I go to the retirement next, because that's, numbers wise, based on the numbers. And I want to do that also, so that I can, because my student loans, I'm after this school year and next school year, I will be eligible for some loan forgiveness. So hopefully we can knock a few $1,000s off of that. They could knock off anywhere from like $2 to $5 or $6 or $7,000. I don't really think I'll get up to 7. I don't think I'll even really get 5, but I would rather get the loans forgived than have to pay them. So I am going to attempt to do that. But it fits in this model of the debt snowball anyway, because that's just kind of where I'm at. I currently have about $10,000 in my savings account, which I know is not the proper steps. I know, I'm aware. And Dave Ramsey would yell at me. He would tell me to take $9,000 and put that on my Discover card, and then I'd only have $5,000 left to pay. And realistically, next month is one of my extra pay months. So between next month and September, I could probably tighten the budget and have it done halfway through October. It's like I said, it's middle of July now, but I don't want to do it. I have reasons for it. They are emotional reasons. They are not rational reasons. I'm aware, but I'm not doing it. So it's sitting there. And again, like, I think for me, knowing that, like, I don't feel like a massive burden, like I don't have a lot of extra money. When I bought my house, I was very adamant that whatever I bought, I would be able to pay for my house, pay for my utilities, and pay for my dog under one paycheck, and most of my food. And I can do that. I can do all of that. My expenses, including my dog, are about $1,200 a month. Summertime is a little bit less because I don't use nearly as much gas. I don't really cook much on my gas stove, and I obviously don't have the heat on. But the winter months, I can spend close to $200 on gas to heat my house. And because I cook a lot more in the winter and I bake and stuff like that. So that gets a lot more use then. But, those are the only months where budget would get really, really tight living on one paycheck. So I still have like that extra paycheck, that extra $1,300 where I can just go buy stuff that I want. I can just go have fun with the money, which I kind of do, and I need to stop doing. That's my big problem. I need to budget for that reason alone. Like, because otherwise I'll just be like, hey, I got paid today. Like, I got extra money. I'll go out to eat. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. But I think it might be hard for me. Like, it may be hard for me to stay disciplined in some ways because I don't feel the crunch. I just know it's there and it bothers me that it's there. But I don't feel like panicked about, oh my God, I can barely scrape enough money to get by for today, or for this month. I'm not really in that boat. I'm very, very fortunate in that sense. And so I would not necessarily say that you should be watching these videos to get, I'll give some ideas. I'll talk about, my experience and what I've been doing, but I come from a very, very privileged place, like a very privileged place. Ultimately, like, I could go to my parents tomorrow and ask them for all that money and just owe them, or just tell them to take it out of my inheritance or something like that. Like, I'm very, very blessed and very, very privileged to be in that kind of a situation. I've got a good paying job, pretty good paying job for the area. Found a pretty good house that's in good shape. And yeah, so I might take something like, if I get down to like the last $2,000 or something like that, or last $2,500, and I'm putting like, let's say I'm putting $1,500 down on the card, on the payment, like I might take an extra $1,000 or even an extra 15, something like that towards the very end to just get it paid off and done with. But as of right now, like, to take $9,000 of my savings and throw it on a car, like I'm not willing to do that. I am the only person financially responsible for my house. And so if something, it's not even like, if there were, if I had a partner or something and there was more income coming in, I would feel better about being able to cover any kind of, real serious financial issue. But I don't. And like I said, since I'm not really feeling like I can't keep my head above water with my debt, I'm just not gonna do it. So, yeah, so that's my debt total. I will upload some more videos in the future that talk about like my actual, debt situation, my budget, and my plans for things like that.